Georgie, come on up, George.
I haven't called Georgie in a while. Thank you for that.
I could have said Georgie Porgy, but I didn't.
So I guess you guys heard that expireds are back and all this fun stuff. So they're asking me to kind of talk to you a little bit about expireds. Now we only got 40 minutes, so I'm gonna talk fast. I will certainly stop and answer any questions or anything like that. And unfortunately, I can't give you like a full total breakdown system of expireds, but I'm gonna try to give you a general overview to at least get you started. There's enough information in here to have you calling expireds tomorrow morning, if you'd like. And I'm always open to kind of, chat a little bit about this stuff or clarify certain things and all that. Does that sound good?
Yes.
All right. So just 3 points three pillars I mainly want to cover today. Why should you go after expired listings? What you need to get started, and creating an expired lead generation system all of your own. So why expired listings? We can all come up with millions of reasons, and I won't spend too much time belaboring this, but essentially they've already raised their hand. It's just like for sale by owners. Expireds want to sell. If you're cold calling around a neighborhood, you don't know. You might be on the phone with somebody who just spent 60 grand updating their kitchen. So they're probably not going to sell for at least a couple of years. But with expireds, they recently were on the market and they recently came off the market. So their mindset around selling is somewhere there. They are frustrated in many cases, but they're also open to change in a lot of cases. So I've noticed from previous experience that a seller, after about 45 days on the market, they tend to get a little frustrated with their agent, right? Even if you're as good as me or as good as you guys, right? So after about 45 days, they're like, come on, what's going on? As we all know and kind of mentioned in the team meeting, it's usually centered around price, right? But they don't want to hear that. They want to know the other stuff. Like, what are the other reasons you're not selling my home? But in any case, as their home expires and you're reaching out to them, this gives you an opportunity to kind of differentiate yourself, offer them something new, have a unique opportunity to stand out and just kind of share with them a new system. So as you're calling expireds, whether you have a different way in mind, like going down to number 4 here, I try to position myself as the second chance expert for the expired contacts that I make. I've got a little flyer that talks about my second chance seller listing system, thanks to ChatGPT that helped me create something like that. And to be quite frank, most of the stuff on that list, aside from reviewing what was happening the last 3-6 months that they were on the market, most of the stuff on that list is what their first agent probably didn't do, but should have done the first time around. Does that make sense? And that's probably the hidden secret about working with expireds. A lot of times, there's obviously many factors that go into why a home doesn't sell in some cases, but oftentimes we find that the reason why the seller is so dissatisfied and open to a conversation is because a lot of the boxes that should have been checked while they were on the market were not. Okay. Anything from, and I've heard it all, like, why do you think your home didn't sell? Well, my agent never did an open house. My agent never called me after he listed my property. My agent never answered the phone when I called them. That's always crazy. I mean, I know they don't answer when I call them, but the fact that their sellers called them and they took 2 or 3 days to respond just blows my mind. All right. Same thing with text. Like, yeah, I texted her on Monday and I wouldn't hear back until a day later or something like that. As far as comparisons, I wanted to just kind of do a quick thing. I got ChatGPT to help me that. And I'm gonna mention ChatGPT a little bit in here because Tara did ask me to kind of show her or to talk to you guys about how I incorporate AI with promoting and going after expired listings. So I asked them to kind of give me a quick comparison of what was happening in 2019, which is kind of the pre-pandemic era, and what's going on right now. And as you can see, in 2019, about 40% of the homes that were listed for sale expired in the market. And now back to 2025, we're back up to about 35 to 55 in most markets. Okay. So as far as people saying expireds are back and all that kind of stuff, that's what they're talking about. I can tell you in the height of the craziness, I don't know what they call the market for 2020 to 2023, but whatever it was, I could tell you that expireds were down by like 80%. So for a guy like me, it was a really sad period of time. Because, listings are selling over the weekend, but it's harder and harder to get them because they were selling over the weekend. So not many expireds. And let me tell you, the ones that did expire in that time, they were a special kind of crazy. I did list a couple during that era, but it was not a fun time.
There's a reason it expired.
Yeah. And you could say that in any market, like there's a reason why they expired, and that's kind of worth exploring. Be careful. David Blanton's been really helpful about me, keeping me tamed about making up stories and this and that, because a lot of times when I hear somebody, I'm like, oh, the reason why your home didn't expire is because I don't say this, but I'm like, oh, the reason why your home expires is because you're crazy. Okay, thank you. And so a lot of times I'll disqualify somebody based on a preconceived notion that may or may not be accurate, you know, so. Just be careful with that. And I bring that up too, because David kind of corrected my thinking in this too, as a good coach does. Down there at the bottom right, I put my current expired database. I have 458 that I consider in my qualifying section of my database. And I'll talk about the database I use and all that kind of stuff in a minute. But that's basically 458. When I put qualifying, that means that I haven't spoken with them, or I spoke with them and they let me know, what they thought of me and my industry and just hung up real quick. Or we just didn't build a good enough rapport to where if I call them back, they'd somewhat remember me. So I just leave them in that column and I'm just basically auto dialing them until they pick up or call the police or block my number. And then what I've noticed recently was that of the 458 in my database, 34% of them had been listed for less than 30 days before they withdrew from the marketplace. Those are withdrawals, not necessarily expires. I thought that, and I don't know, I'm sorry, I didn't really track that back before 2019, but I just found it interesting because I am getting a lot more contacts and not necessarily getting the industry average that I would like. So I'm just trying to figure out, of these people. Now, I had my own story laid out and I shared it with David Blanton. He was like, well, George, I don't know if that's accurate, man. Well, it was like, and he started making up 3 or 4 other stories that seemed plausible as well. I was like, crap. So now he totally confused me. I was like, leave them all in my database. I'm listening. I was about to say, I'm not calling anybody that was listed less than 60 days because when I do follow, like I don't research all these 156 people, but when I did go through and try to track what was happening, a lot of the ones that were listed for like 24 days or 32 days or something like that, I click on, because Mojo has a little link where you can find the listing on Zillow. So I click there and I'll scroll down the listing history and I'd see that they bought it in 2021 for $350. And now they're selling it in 2025 for $650, right? So again, in my head, I'm like, oh, you're crazy. That's why your home's not selling, right? So whether or not that's because their agent misinformed them or they're this and that, there are other ones that are not quite that big of a gap. And they're just like, yeah, no, the market stinks right now. And the market is the market. Your ability to sell in any market is important. So we try to shift the conversation that way. But that's just something that I've noticed, like 34, that's a big number to me. I don't know if it's always been that way, but to have 1/3 of almost 500 people that I'm trying to reach out to have been on the market for less than 60 days speaks to something. It seems odd to me. And it could very well be that after 40, 45 days, they decided, you know what, with all the craziness that's been going on in the marketplace, it's just not for them. And of course, if you bought your home a year or 2 ago, it's going to be difficult to break even or make a profit when you sell, most likely, right? Because we're not in that. I mean, if you bought your home in 2019, you might have doubled your money in a couple of years, but in most normal markets, the real estate fees, closing costs, and just the average cost of sell, it's going to take a couple of years for the market value to go up to hit that. So any questions on any of this stuff so far? Anybody noticing anything else that deals with expired and talk with expires?
I think those numbers are shocking.
Yeah,
They're so high.
they are crazy high. It's ridiculous. All right, so I asked ChatGPT to give me the real reasons why a home doesn't sell. Okay, now, as Dara mentioned earlier, and I'm totally with her, she kind of stole my thunder on that. It's pretty much price, right? It is, right?
Sorry.
It's always priced because it's overpriced for the market. Okay, if you bought a home in 2024 and you're trying to sell it in 2025 and you're trying to get what you paid for it, it's probably, I don't want to say overpriced, but if you're trying to add the commission to it, it's not. Lack of a market exposure or poor marketing, in Bold, we all learned that even if we advertise it more, we're just telling more people that your home is overpriced. If you have an overpriced property, it's kind of hard. So you can pretty much tie all this stuff back to price. However, I will say that when you sit down with a seller and you say that, they're not as impressed by your wisdom and logic as you are, right? Because they're like, no, it's the agent, or it's the lack of an open house, or it's the market, or they didn't run a Facebook ad, not even one, and they didn't do, a YouTube video and all that kind of stuff. And maybe that's stuff that you can address and put together in your listing plan or your second chance listing system. When you hear feedback from, multiple people saying this is why they feel like the home didn't sell, then you might want to be able to address that as you sit down and talk to them about it. So going over reasons why a home doesn't sell and setting level expectations is important, whether you're on the phone with them or meeting with them for the first time. So what you need to get started. All right, so primarily what you need to get started is data and lead sources, right? All right, so you can do this in many different ways. You can go the inexpensive route And you can pull up listings on the MLS every morning that show expired, right? Because at midnight in the multiple listing, if your listing expires on the 30th, at midnight on the 30th, your listing is expired. And now it's free game to any agents that want to contact them and talk to them about their previous experience or whether or not they're still interested in selling. That's fantastic. Now, bear in mind that if you're going to go that route, you got to pull up the listings, the whole list, but you can't just dial that whole list, right? Why not?
You know, call list,
Well,
or you have to look up some numbers. You have to
yeah,
find-
I'm not gonna mention do not call this stuff. That's definitely something you wanna talk to your broker. But yeah, but no, yeah, absolutely. You don't wanna just free call. Plus you don't have their number, right? Most agents aren't putting the number in the MLS.
They relist.
Relist.
Superintendent.
What if they relist? So now you got a list of 50 expires, but of those 50, how many of them do you think relisted with their same agent or somebody else? Like, how many of you think that some people know that their listing's about to expire in a couple of weeks and they themselves ask their friends for referrals or reach out to agents on their own based on that thing, right? So a lot of times when I catch an expired listing, they've already relisted with a different agent and I'm calling them like the morning they expired, right? So, you know, that's something that you gotta pay attention to. So if you're gonna do it yourself manually, you can pull it from the MLS. But then you need to go back and cross-check those addresses. You can't just pull all the new listings for that day, right? Because they might have listed tomorrow, or they might relist 3 days after, or whatever. So you can't just pull up the recently expired and the recently relisted. You gotta go back in and put in each address to make sure it's not active, or you should. You don't have to, I guess, but you probably should. Because it is annoying when people call active listings and say your home's expired. Trust me, I know, because I get plenty of calls from agents. Who the hell do you think you are calling my client and tell them their home is expired? So, essentially, you want to really make sure you look at that. So as you're cross-checking that, once you finally cross-check it, you take your 50 expireds of the day, and they're not really 50 a day, but you know, maybe if you went to the whole metro Atlanta area, but you take your 50 expireds and now you cross-check it and maybe you got 20 that didn't relist. I don't know, that's probably a bad, it's maybe the other way. Anyway, 20 that didn't relist that you can call. Now you got to call them, but now you got to look up their number, right? So now you got to spend time with each one looking up their number. And this, I know this because this is how I started doing expired listings, because I'm old. And when I got started going after expires, we didn't have auto dialers and all this fun stuff. So, you know, go in, cross-check it, get the thing, then you go look up their number. You could use, was it Haynes Crisscross Directory? That's talking about, oh, they used to come in a CD. And you put it in your laptop. This laptop had a DVD tray, and you put it in there, and you get all the numbers of a particular geographic region. In any case, so you look up the number, you got to find the number, then you got to make the call and hope that they answer. Okay, and based on that, that's just one reach out. That's not even really considered a contact unless they pick up the phone. So for about 55, well, I think as low as 45 to upwards, you can actually pay a company to provide you with data on expired listings for sale by owners, things of that nature. Okay, so that's primarily what you want to do, because if you factor in the time it takes to do that over a period of time, to look up the listings, cross-check to make sure it's not available, look up the phone number, dial the phone number, you know, and all that kind of stuff, it can be kind of time consuming, and you'll more than make up the 50, 60 bucks that you spend on these leads. Okay, so I'm gonna talk to you about a couple of them here, just so you kind of know what's out there. Mojo Sales is, Bojo is what it's always referred to, but it's mojosales.com. That's the system I use. Now, they have, they're basically a triple line dialer, so you can dial 3 numbers at the same time. They're also a CRM, which I don't really use their CRM feature that much, but it's included in the package that I pay for, because I pay for the expensive 3-line dialer. And then they also, you can store your data on there as well as they provide the data. So with Mojo, you can take that one platform, have them import the expired listings that they've already cross-checked for you and looked up the number for, and they're not going to get you 100% of the numbers, and they're not going to be 100% accurate. When I say 100, I mean, we're way lower than 100, like 60, 70% accurate. And sometimes I'm calling like in-laws in Oklahoma, and I'm like, what is your problem? Why would I know anything about my daughter's house in Atlanta? I don't know. I just got this number and I called it. Sorry, you know. So, but you know, it does provide. It goes online and does whatever they do to look up phone numbers. And so that's Mojo is the one that I use for the dialer. I actually get my data from LandVoice. The reason I get my data from Land Voice is many, many years ago, I was roaming around at family reunion in the convention hall, and I got sold by a Land Voice representative, and she gave me this great deal because we were there on a convention. And so I got this super cheap expired plus pro old leads and database and all this stuff for like $750, like 10 years ago. So $750 a year is what I pay to Land Voice. And they've since upgraded the cost and upgraded some of the features, but they've kept me under that same contract. So as soon as they finally say, get out of here, the credit card that I had on file almost expired one year, and I was like, oh no, I had to call them and like, hey, make sure you charge me for this.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to lose my $750. It's like
On it, yeah.
it's like $1,900 now. So I'm keeping that. So basically what I do, which if you're gonna start this fresh, as soon as they say, well, look, we're not gonna honor that anymore, that's just way too much, then I'll probably just let Mojo provide me with the data. But Land Voice, I gotta go in and download the list every morning and then upload it into Mojo and then make my calls versus if I had Mojo providing the data, I could just click the button on expires, hit the start button, and now I'm dialing these expires. But Land Voice has great data. They don't just do expires, they do for sale by owners, they do for rent by owners. They have a setup where they can pull expireds from 3 years ago, which is good. Changing markets, kind of like the one we're in, for anybody that maybe expired before a good shift market or something like that. So you can buy older list of expireds. They've got all kinds of data. They don't have a dialer. It's just the data itself is for Land Voice. Redx is kind of across. Redx is the one I started using back when I finally realized that there's actually companies out there that will look up the data and I didn't have to do that whole MLS thing and crisscross and all that fun stuff. Redx, I used to buy the data from before they had a dialer, before I met the representative from Land Voice. So Redx is a great company. They provide good data, good numbers, and they've been around the longest. In fact, Land Voice was basically one of the CEOs from Redx jump ship and created Land Voice. So they both are really good systems. Redx was kind of the original in that world, in that space. In any case, since then they've added a dialer, but theirs is only a single line dialer. With Mojo, you get a triple line dialer, which some kind of makes people nervous sometimes, but at the rate people answer their phones, especially these days, you almost need that to get any kind of level of consistent, conversation with people. So with Redx, you can have a single line dialer, which is still good. You have all the numbers in your Redx system. You hit start, it dials one number. Once you finish that call, it hangs up, or you press the button to hang up. Then it goes on to dial the next number and so on, which is similar to what Mojo does. Mojo is dialing 3 at the same time. When one person picks up, it pauses the other 2 lines and lets you have that conversation and you go on. People say, well, what if 2 people or 3 people answer at the same time? According to Mojo, they time it by the 1/8 of a second, and whoever got there first gets the conversation. And then the other person, you can have a pre-recorded message if you want, but I didn't do that. It's just kind of a blank line. And once I finish that conversation, it'll read all the other person. So that's their answer to that. So no, you don't get stuck talking to. Now, back in the day when I was doing this before all these dialers, I had 2 headsets. I got the tech guy to come in and put me a second phone in my office. So I had 2 phones side by side, and I got 2 earpieces, one for the left ear, one for the right ear. And I would dial one number and dial the next number to try to be a little bit more efficient. I learned that from somebody else that said, this is how I do it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And there was some cool stuff to that. Obviously, it wasn't as official as a computer dialing 3 lines for you. But it did keep me on my toes, and it did not allow me to multitask in any way whatsoever, right? So I wasn't checking email on, with the triple line dialer, sometimes you're sitting there, and if you go through like a 5-minute span where nobody's answering, then you get bored. Oh, I get bored. I got ADD. So I'm just like, okay, let's see what's going on. And then you start reading stuff, and then you get into something, and finally someone's like, hello, and you're like, oh. You're like, what? And then you got to switch back. So, when they say multitasking is a lie and, have it focus lead generation, that's what they're talking about. Like, there are times when I'm almost annoyed that somebody answered the phone because I've got a really good in this other thing that I'm doing. So they're annoyed I'm calling. I'm annoyed they're answering the phone. And it's just not a good, communication system. So just be wary of or mindful of that. You're using the wrong words lately. It's so funny. So Vulcan 7, this one was kind of the pillar, a lot of top hallucinating agents, but I haven't heard anything about it recently, except for I watched a class with Jeff Glover, and he talks about that he still uses Vulcan 7. So this was the pinnacle. I didn't really like their attitude when I called them, and it might have just been the sales rep, but it was like, okay, submit an application and we'll let you know if you're a fit for a product. I was like, okay, that's cool. I get it, right? You tease people like, hey, you know, the hard line close, like, you know, well, maybe this isn't for you, right? So I sent them the application and they were just like, Mojo was like, yeah, we'll give you a week to try it out, see if you like it, this and that. They were like, no, you have to sign a 3-year or 2-year contract. It's $300 a month, blah, 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 blah. And then he almost seemed, and again, it could have been a salesperson, but he almost seemed like I was inappropriate for asking questions. So honestly, I just hung up after and then just called Mojo and set it up. So I don't know too much about Vulcan 7. I've heard good things about it from the people that actually use it. You don't have to upload this. They provide you with all the data, and it is expensive, but it's a triple line dollar. And I've never heard anything negative about it, except for one other person that had the similar experience when they called in to investigate it, who also uses Mojo now. So I don't want to knock them because, again, many top producers at a much higher level than me swear by it and love it to death. So if it's something you want to look into, that's something you can look into, but I'm not really familiar with it. So you got that. What do you need next? You need scripts and dialogues. Okay. So you want to kind of have enough scripts and dialogues to get you through these main bullet points here as you're on the phone. And you can wing it as I like to do. But it's not always the best thing. So maybe getting down, and over the years, because I've been calling expireds for a while now, and you know, over the years, I kind of stopped role playing and stopped script practicing, which is very dangerous for me because I talk a lot. Okay, when I get to talking, sometimes I'm usually quiet until I start talking, and nobody can shut me up. And that's great, and well, maybe not, but it's okay in your personal life. But when you're on the phone trying to be efficient and trying to make sure you're saying the right things to generate some sort of response, it's best that you have a script in front of you so that you can hit the hot points while continuing to babble like I do. So having an opening call script, voicemail script, text message script, all these different things, you should actually have those printed out, and you should be practicing them on a regular basis, ideally with a script partner, okay? Because there's nothing better than getting feedback, especially from another agent who's also trying to have the same, or you know, trying to produce the same level of expertise in a certain field as you are, okay? Bold has some great rules for script practice that I can tell you that I will usually follow the first week of script practice, but over time, me and whoever I was scripting with, we'd kind of get off that. And that's the, you know, show up on time, talk nothing about the script, nothing but the script, always give the appointment. In other words, have objections, but don't be so clever that you're having these great objections that the agent on the other end just never gets the appointment, right? Because the whole idea is we're practicing to win, not practicing to lose it. And so, you know, I invite you to definitely consider doing some script practice. If you don't have anybody, just read your scripts out loud 3 times while standing up. But I'm sure you can find a coach or somebody that will practice with you occasionally. Or if you have no friends like me, you go to your friend ChatGPT and they can actually script practice with you, which is actually, even if you do have a friend and script practice with, occasionally you might want to go to ChatGPT because it was really cool. So Jason Bonds had mentioned it at the ALC retreat. And so at first I got my microphone and I was actually talking into the microphone, and then that was what was typing in ChatGPT, and then it would respond. And it was so cool because it kind of gave feedback. Great job, George. You know, you really nailed it with getting back to their original why. And I was like, oh, this is freaking good. And then I said, next time, maybe try this. This is a little less apprehensive. Or would you like for me to break that down for a script that you can use in your, you know, when you're making your calls? And I'm like, she knows I make. Now you know I'm messed up, right? Yeah. I have a friend now.
We have a friend.
Lexus told me it was a she, so that's the only reason. I said it was she. And I talked to her way too much. Anyway, she will tell you, like, would you like this, you know, harder close or something like that? Or a lot of times I'll take my script, my expired call opener, and I'll drop it in there and I'll say, hey, can you give me a call to action around, I just realized this was the bottom of this that error in it. But anyway, I'll say, hey, can you give me a call to action that is in line with exactly what to say for real estate agents? Okay. So are you open-minded to a quick conversation about how you're willing to help, how we're helping sellers succeed the second time around? Okay. So you can actually, it knows exactly what to say as or she knows exactly what to say as real estate agents, because I've asked her several times to take a text script that I have and rewrite with either that or a stronger call to action, or maybe a different call to action just to see if something's different. So, you know, I read an article that said that the more we use AI, the dumber our brains get because we're not being creative and we're not utilizing that. So But I'm not your therapist. I'm talking to you about expired. In that world, this is a great tool when somebody replies something, and I don't know how to respond. Like, for example, I got one the other day. It was basically, the gist of it was, we're sick of this process. Like, I sent a text and they responded, we're so sick of this process. We never had anybody call us while we were listed. And now we've had like 50 agents call us, the day it expires. This is ridiculous. Uh, so, ordinarily I'd look at that, I'd read it, I'd think about what I wanted to say. This time I just pasted it into ChatGPT and said, hey, how would you respond to this? Now, mind you, I've set up ChatGPT. I didn't say just that, I kind of prompted it and all that stuff. And I've got it set up on the back end and all that stuff. So, it knows how I want it to think and how I want it to respond to me to whatever degree it can. So basically I took that text message, I plugged it in there. It said, try this. And I was like, that's a little too nice. I'm not that nice. And I'm not rude, but it was like, hey, no problem at all. Thank you so much. I'm just so glad you called me. And it didn't sound a lot like me. It sounded like ChatGPT. So, I kind of argued with her a little bit and she got me down to what I thought was a pretty decent response. So I copied and pasted it, bam. And this is why we're friends. I got an old email that I used to send out and I plugged it into ChatGPT and said, hey, can you freshen this up and make it a little bit more modern with, this and that. Read through it, liked it. So I decided, hey, that's my new email that I want to send out when I'm reaching out to expired listings. Also follow-up. She helped me kind of take the original text message that I had and just kind of
George.
So sometimes I'll just plug it in and say, hey, can you shorten this a little bit to, get to the point a little bit quicker? And so that's mainly how I'm using ChatGPT. I'm definitely based on what I hear AI people talking about with ChatGPT, I'm kind of a rookie. I don't use it to the fullest effects, but it's a great way to kind of help you get scripts. You can take the scripts that you're kind of learning from Ignite, Bold, KWU, and then type them in or something similar and say, hey, can you revise this to sound a little less, a little more friendly or a little less friendly, a little more direct, professional, however you want to do it. You can use that to kind of help you. So it does help more than just, rewriting your remarks on your MLS, but you can use it for that as well. So scripts and dialogues, having the core scripts ready for yourself that you're going to need whenever going after them. And then the systems and tools, we kind of talked about it, systems and tools, the dialer, you don't need a dialer. You can always use your cell phone or your office phone. But this is probably the one tool I would not give up if you're going to consistently reach out to expireds or anybody for sale by owners, cold calling neighborhoods or geographic, cold calling your geographic farm or absentee owners, whatever you're going to use that's going to take a lot of dialing. Having a dialer and a triple line dialer is awesome. Now Mojo has you can buy a single line, you can do a double line, you can do a 3-line. You don't have to have 3 phones. It does it right from your computer. You just get you dial into their system from your office phone. You run it. Picture of it here. Yeah. Anyway, you run it and then you're dialing. Now, again, I kind of mentioned it earlier. The biggest thing you got to worry about that is, as time goes on, your mind starts to wander because, you're supposed to be focused. And I try focus. And then something happens. I don't know what. It's different every time. It's different every time. So tracking sheet, you want to get that together. Obviously, if you're going to make these calls, you want to have a goal to, contacts and celebrate the contacts, not just the appointments, because, sometimes you go through a lot of contacts before you get an appointment. And if all you're celebrating is the appointments, you might be sad. So figure out, either get with your coach. You can talk to me. The Bold 20 a day is kind of not a bad number to go through. The Ignite 10 a day. Not a bad number to go to, but set a goal and then track it and then review it, how it's going, this and that. The reason, and I did a whole class on tracking once because tracking is so important. Because not only is it, am I scripted well enough or am I doing good enough on the phone to get the appointment? But then if I'm getting the appointment, am I doing good enough at the appointment to get the, results? So going back to what they said, at least with ChatGPT, these were very specific instructions to go to, the current industry average to determine, what the current conversion rate is for expired listings. So again, this is more of a ChatGPT national statistic, but it was 2 to 5%. So 20 to 50 conversations for an appointment, which some people that seems like a lot, some people that seems like a piece of cake. Either way, when you're looking at that, you want to try to get yourself within that model, right? So if you're talking to 75 people before your appointment, then that's still not bad. It's, but maybe you can start thinking about, do I need to work on my scripts, or is there something I need to do better that'll get me in that 20 to 50 range? And then if you're going on appointments, I think the MREA model says, 70%? You're supposed to convert 70% of your listing appointments. And so if you're doing less than 70% of that, then you might want to work on your presentation or your attire or your smile, whatever. So that's kind of the different reasons why tracking. And so with expired, same thing. A lot of people say, oh, I've tried expires, it doesn't work. Well, that's just crazy. There's plenty of people that, build their business around expireds and all that kind of stuff. Knowing how many you contacted, how many you followed up with, right? Because what did we learn in many classes that talk about lead generation? It's not the first contact. We're not converting listing appointments on the first contact. It's usually the fourth, fifth, and sixth contacts that actually get you the appointments. While most people are stopping at one or two, right? Especially when they're mean and talk about your mama. It's not fun to call people like that. So, it's important that you follow up and you have a certain follow-up system, which brings us to number 5, having some sort of follow-up materials. And, you can make this expansive. And again, we always talk about resources and this and that. The beauty of KW Command in all its glory is it already has something like this in there, I would imagine. These are stuff that I kind of put together myself using the help of my friend ChatGPT. I guess I'm supposed to name him or her, right? What everybody else was doing. But in any case, I've got my expired listing evaluation. So a lot of times when I'm texting or I'm emailing or even I'm on the phone, like, I offer them, a consultation where I can kind of help them figure out why their home didn't sell. And this is the form I go, nothing fantastic. It's all fantastic. Nothing special about it. It's really questions that you would ask a person who you're talking about listing their home, with the added questions of those that have been on the market for 30, 60, 90 days, 100, more like 90 to 180 days. And basically asking them their experience and what their thoughts were on this and that. So it's actually a little bit, to some degree, they're a lot more skeptical when you meet with the expired listing for an appointment, but they're also, I guess, more easily impressed sometimes because they didn't get a lot of the service things that they needed the first time around. So when they see stuff like this, just the fact that I pulled out a piece of paper and started writing stuff down, they're just like, oh, wow. So you actually have a system in place or something like that. So basically, I just talked to them about what I call the 4 pillars of why a home doesn't sell: price, condition or staging, marketing, and of course, the agent representing you. So I rarely get through this entire form without a big conversation coming out of it and us kind of determining what we think our next step should be as far as listing the property for sale. And again, it's not that complicated, folks, right? If it was overpriced, what's your next step?
Lower the price.
Lower the price. If the agent didn't take professional photos, probably a good thing, right? If the remark said, see GPS, great home, great location, bring all offers, maybe look at the remarks and all that kind of stuff. Again, we all know that pricing is probably the primary reason, but that doesn't mean we should not address or correct a lot of the other stuff that hadn't been done to market and promote the property. Another follow-up systems you can use is in Command. They have a million smart plans, so many of them, in fact, that you'll spend a half a day just going through them. Because don't ever send one directly, because you can go in there and look at other people's and they share theirs, but they also share their signature lines. So just be careful. Or like I had one that I really liked, and the guy was in Hawaii. So all his email or all his text messages started off as aloha. I don't know about you, but if somebody presented to me a sales presentation and they greeted me with aloha, I'm like, what's wrong with this guy? Like, is he on this permanent vacation or whatever? So, make sure if you're going to use the smart plans that are already in Command, which I do recommend because they're all really good and there's nothing new under the sun at this point. So, just taking that, changing the signature lines, read through and make sure they don't have anything else in there that identifies somebody else or somebody else's marketplace. And just utilize one of those. They've got 8x8s, 32 touches, all kinds of stuff in there. If you know what that is, ask your coach. But essentially, you can get whatever kind of action plans you need centered. And this can also help give you, and this is where I got my idea of the second chance seller listing system, which isn't anything different than I've already done. It's just calling it something, right? Like somebody else called there something else. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Let me come up with a name for mine. And then, you know, creating a flyers, anything like that, there's designs already in command that you can edit. Or if you go to KWU, you can just type in whatever's gnarling at you and you'll get videos, scripts, all kinds of crazy stuff. Where you can get more information and even watch videos like with Chris Heller talking about how he does expired listings and his crazy stuff that they used to show with him bold. So all that stuff is out there and available to you. As far as getting started, you want to create yourself a nice little system. On the left side, those bullet points are pretty much what you need to get started tomorrow. Okay, make sure you know where you're getting your data from. I think if you're in the coaching program, they have that data available for you. Set up a daily prospecting schedule. This is the crucial one. Now, I would love to share with you that I prospect 3 hours, but I haven't done that in a long time. That'd be a lot. But you should schedule out whatever time you can or willing to devote to your lead generation. And you should stick to that time with focused lead generation, which doesn't include calling or checking your emails or Facebook or all that kind of stuff. Set up your daily schedule. Get a few scripts. Don't wait till you've got them all mastered to call. Just call, stumble through them. That's so much fun, by the way. Stumbling through it. I used to hate it, as I'm sure everybody hates it. But it's kind of fun too, because I remember one time this guy was like, he said all this stuff and I kind of sat there and I knew there was a script for it and I even knew that I knew it, but I couldn't think of it quick enough. Because I sat there with this blank pause and he says, "Did I stump you?" At that point I was like, "Yep," and I hung up. I didn't want to touch it. Now I probably wouldn't have hung up. I would have been, try to make it a conversation. And I'm less concerned with saying the right thing and more concerned with keeping the conversation flowing. But you do yourself a favor to have read these scripts before so that you know how to automatically keep the conversation flowing without having to recall the actual script. As well as objections. There's only about 5 or 6 objections that expireds give you. And there's really only about 3 that they give you consistently. So, learning how to overcome those objections is a big part. And if you're having trouble, ask ChatGPT. Say, "Hey, ChatGPT, my friend, I'm having trouble. I keep getting the same response. Like in November, when I'm not doing anything until, or not November, but October. I ain't doing anything until after the election, right? So I get that same response. I try to, I come up with that objection handler, and then of course set a note to follow back up with them in December, which, hey, that script was, hey, you said after the election, it's after the election. Oh, we're gonna wait till spring. So anyway, just getting familiar with the way the objections are and all that kind of stuff. And setting up a follow-up sequence real quick. My follow-up sequence is, I mentioned before that I had 400 some odd that I'm qualifying. Once I qualify those 400, one of those 458s, then I either delete them or I plug them into a follow-up system. And it's a pretty basic, I got it for expires, but you can also set the same system up for your METs or your PCSOI, for cell bonds, for anybody that any database that you keep. And it's just the ABC system. You can do it the 1, 2, 3 system, whatever. So anybody that's inside 30 days or the hot, nurture and watch. Okay, if you have a database that labels them for you. So essentially anybody that's going to sell within 30 days is an A or a hot or a 1. And they're going to hear from me at least once, maybe twice a week until their appointed time to list. It's not, hey, you ready to list yet? Sometimes it's an item of value, a quick conversation, or, oh, hey, I thought of you, whatever. But a hot lead, an A lead, they get, once or twice a week. The Bs are usually between 31 days and 90 days. And those are going to get a twice a month thing. Same kind of thing, follow up, checking in. Item of value, how you doing? Remember my name? Essentially is all I'm saying, right? Remember me. Don't forget about me when you're ready to list. And then the C's are anybody that's past 90 days, theoretically 90 to 180 days out from doing anything. If they're past 180 days out, they're probably not a lead. I'll call those a D, but some people don't keep the D list. But in any case, 91 days to 180 days, they're a C. They should be hearing from you monthly, Or they take whatever date they say they're gonna divide it in half, and that's your next fall. So if they say, I'm gonna do this 3 years from now, in a year and a half is when you should check back in. Or really, if they say 3 years, you're not really, they're not really a lead, they're just somebody. All right, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. Any thoughts, questions? I'm not gonna just went all over it.
You mentioned there's 5 main objections. Can you hit on some of those?
No, Chat GPT, so, let's see.
I'll bet.
The market, the agent, we've, probably out cold.
The rate.
Yeah, so what makes you any different than the person that we listed with before? Why didn't you call while the house was listed? We're waiting.
Show my house.
You never showed my house. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna wait. The market's bad. Yeah, what other ones?
Yeah, we don't wanna sell anymore, we changed our mind.
We're gonna sell it ourselves.
Oh, yeah, we're looking for a cash offer, we don't wanna list it again. Or we'll sell it if you have a buyer, we'll let you sell it and pay you a commission, but we don't wanna list it. Or not most, I said, a lot of people are saying that, they're looking for a cash offer, investor. They only want to sell to an investor, they don't want to go with the process. Now, a good thing too, to think about as they're talking about those rejections, is what they're actually saying, right? Why would you want to take 10-20% less for your home to sell to an investor versus the open market? Probably because you had a crappy, horrible experience. I don't know if everybody who thinks they're gonna sell to an investor realizes they're getting 10-20% less than what they could get if they marketed their home, or if somebody marketed their home properly. So that's kind of where that conversation goes as far as that affects. We're only gonna sell to an investor. So that's interesting, I understand. And so are you looking to sell to an investor just because your home is in disrepair, or because you were just frustrated with the process? And then, that conversation goes to wherever it goes, but that's essentially, in my mind, a big portion of those people are saying, look, this experience stinks. Like I've had people say, I don't want people running through my home. You'll get that a lot during the holidays. We don't want people in and out during the holidays, all that kind of stuff. So, thanks, Dave. I try to think of the stump question. I was like, man, make sure I cover the stump question. And that should have been one. I'm sorry. I should have been prepared to answer. But yeah, there's only about 5 or 6 common objections that you have to get ready for. So, yes, sir.
My phone got tagged as spam and I went online to figure out how to register something to make it not get tagged as spam, but all those dialers and your own number, they come up as potential spam where no one's answering?
So, so Mojo has what they call the whitelist registration. And so what I've started using, and I probably did this too late because I'm pretty sure my cell phone number is considered spam and to some people. But I've started using my Google Voice number as I'm using my dollar. And that way, I don't usually answer calls that come to that line anyway, because that's usually the number I also give to people I don't really want to give my number to. So in that case, when I'm using auto dollars, I'll usually do that. And you can register, and the cool thing about, I don't know how to do this on a separate of Mojo, but on Mojo, they say, hey, by the way, if your number is not registered here and you make a lot of calls, they're going to be on spam. But I have had clients phone and said, hey, man, your contact had gotten deleted somehow and your phone rang as potential spam. So, yes, when you call a lot of people with your cell phone, so if you are using the dollar, I would recommend at least using the office line, or your office desk line, because if you're gonna have a number tagged as spam, you kind of don't really want it to be your cell phone. Great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because yes, my cell phone I haven't called for my cell phone in a long time. I've purchased a couple of other numbers through different sources, and those are numbers that they're legit numbers. They will reach me. Like if you call into any of those, they will ring to my cell phone. But yeah, I've tried to mix the numbers up too to avoid that.
When I Googled it, we found obviously there's an AI solution for everything, right? And it gave a website to register on. So if you do know your number get tagged,
Yeah,
Google it and figure out what steps you can take.
yeah, so absolutely. Great point. All right, anything else? All right, thank you guys.
Sure.